Okay, imagine a civilization so powerful, so incredibly advanced that the stories say nothing like it had ever been seen before on Earth. Now, imagine that same civilization being completely wiped off the map, all because of its own pride. This isn't some new fantasy movie. This is the ancient cautionary tale of the people of Ad.
So that's the big question, right? How does a nation that seems totally invincible, a true superpower of its time, just disappear? Let's dive into one of history's most dramatic stories about a nation's rise and its catastrophic fall.
All right, our story starts way back, around 2000 BC, down in the Arabian Peninsula. We're talking about a people known as the Ad. And look, they weren't just another ancient tribe. They were a phenomenon, a civilization at the absolute peak of its power. So tradition tells us the Ad were descended from Noah's son, Sam, and they were gifted with just incredible physical traits. I mean, they're often described as giants, incredibly tall and strong. They lived in what was basically a paradise, overflowing with wealth, and they built this magnificent civilization. It was so unique that the Quran itself says no other nation was ever created quite like them. And at the heart of their empire was this legendary city, Iram of the Pillars. It was famous for its gigantic columns, a real architectural marvel. For centuries, people thought it was just a myth, a story. But then, get this, in 1984, using satellite imagery, archaeologists found a ruins deep in the desert that perfectly matched the descriptions, right where this supposed paradise once existed. Well, all that power and all that prosperity, it bred a really dangerous kind of arrogance. This question they would ask, who is mightier than us in strength? It wasn't just a simple boast, it was their whole worldview. They looked at their strength, their city, their wealth, and they figured they were untouchable. And that pride, that became the very seed of their own destruction. But as their pride swelled, a messenger was sent to try and steer them back onto the right path. And this is where we get a major showdown between divine guidance and just pure human hubris. You see, their main problem was a spiritual one. The Ad were supposedly the very first civilization after the Great Flood to abandon the idea of one God and turn back to worshiping idols carved out of stone. They devoted themselves to these statues, Sada, Samud, and Hira, and in doing so, they completely forgot where all their blessings actually came from. So, a prophet named Hud, who was one of their own people, came to warn them. He begged them, worship the one true God, ask for forgiveness. But their response? Just total scorn. They called him a fool, a liar. They said, we will never abandon the gods our fathers worshipped. And then, in this ultimate act of defiance, they basically challenged him, saying, if this punishment you're talking about is so real, then bring it on. And that challenge? It was answered. Not with a bang, but with silence. For 3 long years, not a single drop of rain fell from the sky. Their springs dried up, their animals died, and their beautiful green lands turned to dust. Their paradise was dying. This was the first warning shot. You'd think that would get their attention, right? Nope. The hardship just made them more stubborn. And it all leads to the final, catastrophic moment of their story, where a desperate prayer for help accidentally becomes a choice for total annihilation. Okay, so facing complete ruin from this drought, the Arabs did what people back then often did when they were desperate. They sent a delegation, 70 of their top leaders, to the holy site of Mecca to pray for relief, to pray for an end to their suffering. And this is where the story takes its final, tragic turn. As the delegation prayed, they were given a choice. 3 clouds appeared in the sky, 1 white, 1 red, and 1 black. Their leader, thinking he was being clever, chose the black cloud. I mean, it looked like it held the most rain, right? But as soon as he made his choice, a voice from the heavens boomed. You have chosen destruction. Meanwhile, back in their homeland, the rest of the Ad saw this massive, dark cloud rolling toward them. They were ecstatic. They thought their suffering was finally over. They started celebrating, shouting to each other, look, the rain we prayed for is coming. Oh, but that cloud wasn't carrying any life-giving rain. Not even close. It was carrying their punishment. It was a furious, roaring, ice-cold wind, the very thing they had dared their prophet to bring down on them. And in an instant, all that hope turned into pure terror. And this storm, it was relentless. For 7 nights and 8 continuous days, this wind just howled and ripped through everything. There was absolutely no escape. It was a complete and overwhelming force of nature.
The result was just total annihilation. The wind tore people from their homes, shattered their incredible buildings, and basically scoured the land clean. The source material uses this really haunting description. It says the mighty people of Ad were left scattered about like hollow trunks of palm trees, uprooted, empty, and completely lifeless.
So why is this story told over and over again? Well, it's not just some ancient tale of destruction. It's been preserved because it's a timeless lesson, a lesson about power, about arrogance, and about being held accountable. At its core, the story of Ad is a huge warning sign. It tells us that no matter how strong, wealthy, or advanced any society becomes, it's never truly invincible. It's really a powerful case study on the consequences of pride and a serious argument for the importance of humility. And this quote from the source material makes the reason pretty clear. These stories aren't just there to be historical records. They're meant to be active lessons, designed to make every generation that hears them pause and think about these dangerous patterns of pride and destruction. And that brings the lesson right to our doorstep, doesn't it? The story forces us to kind of look in the mirror and ask a tough question. In our own lives, in our societies today, do we ever get so confident in our own strength and our own achievements that we start to ignore the warnings, that we become heedless of the consequences? In the end, the fall of the people of Ad leaves us with this one powerful, simple truth. All their towers, all their wealth, and all the physical strength they were so proud of, it was all just swept away. What lasts is the lesson. Power is always temporary, but the principle of humility, that's eternal.